Hello, my name's Michael and welcome back to my channel. And today I thought I'd do a wrap-up video and talk about all the books I read in September. There are other types of videos I would like to do, but I am taking the easy way out and just doing a wrap-up. One of the reasons I started this channel was to push myself to communicate better about books and communicate better in general. So I feel like doing a wrap up is not pushing myself, and honestly, I feel like I have been just taking the easy way out by just doing a video that just covers a few books instead of taking some time and maybe reviewing a book and putting more focus on that book. I know book reviews don't get as many reviews, and that's something that I struggle with. I feel like we need to spend more time doing reviews and focusing on giving the attention a book deserves, but I feel like sometimes it's not worth it for the view count, and sometimes I just focus too much on the numbers, and that's terrible because I'm not a big booktuber. I don't have many views, so why should I care so much about that number? And to be honest, the main reason I keep doing booktube is because I want to promote translated literature. It is my passion. I love books in translation. I love exploring the world, and I want to spotlight these books. So maybe doing reviews might be a better option, but you can let me know in the comment which you think you prefer to watch or which would you prefer to see. Obviously, if I'm doing reviews, I probably wouldn't do many spoilers, and if I did, I'd probably leave them to the end so people didn't have to feel obliged to watch the entire video. I've been a little slack watching videos. I feel like my motivation with booktube and watching booktube videos fluctuates too much, and I feel like a lot of that is to do with my own motivation and my own desire to be better and not knowing how to improve. Like, I feel like I'm not getting any better. I feel like I'm not seeing that visible growth. So I lose that motivation. But I'm going to try. I'm definitely going to make an effort. I like the community. I like talking about books. I like interacting with people in the comments. And I know that not many people read the books I like to read, which does make it a little difficult for me, but I still love being a part of this community. That being said, I definitely need to do more than just wrap ups, and definitely need to do more than here's a couple of books I've read and just not focus the time on them. Because if I'm making content, I am more likely to be motivated to continue making content. So let's start with the first book I read in September. I was actually trying to finish this before Women in Translation Month ended, and I finished this about 1 a.m. This is MP by Banana Yoshimoto, and translated, like I'm prepared, Ann Sherif. And I really like Banana Yoshimoto. There have been some books of hers that I didn't like. I believe Mushi Mushi is the one that I'm referring to, but I really like this one. It's really dark and really disturbing, but oddly compelling and beautiful. And I feel like I say that a lot about books that I read. I really like the dark and disturbing, but there's beauty to be found in that as well. And this is basically about a famous Japanese writer who wrote a book called NP in English. But every time a person tries to translate it into Japanese, they go mad and eventually suicide. And the author of the book also suicided. It's a collection of short stories, and when they get to the 98th story, it's about when they normally end their life. And it focuses on this girl and her boyfriends trying to translate the book, and it's an exploration into translations. It's an exploration into this idea of going crazy and this idea of trying to bring to life some art that you feel the world needs to see. And it's a really interesting book. I definitely don't expect everyone to read it, but I am a fan of Banana Yoshimoto, and I think she writes some great literature. And I haven't read Kitchen yet, which is probably her most well-known book. I definitely plan to read all her books if possible, anything that's translated into English. I guess I have to talk about Liar by Ayelet Gundar-Goshen, and this was translated from the Hebrew by Sondra Silverston, and this book is trash. I hate this book so much, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. So I did read it all. I should have abandoned this book. Basic premise is this girl working in an ice cream store tells this lie. She accuses this famous person, a famous singer, of something that wasn't true, and it kind of snowballs from there. And we could say it's talking about how we start to believe our own lies and things like that. That could be an interesting topic, but in this era, this time, this is fucking tone deaf and I hate it so much. The idea that we are writing books about women falsely accusing men of rape and exploring that just seems unnecessary considering we have so many victims that are trying to share their story, trying to be believed, trying to press charges against people and struggling through that whole process. A book like this is just wrong time, wrong place. Don't think it'll ever be a good time for a book like this. Trash. Next, I read my book club book, which was Too Much Lip by Melissa Lucashenko. And this is the book that won the Miles Franklin this year. And I actually really enjoyed it. I expected the book to be more about land rights, but I really appreciated the way it explored the community, the family. The basic premise behind the whole book is that this land developer wants to buy the lands of the Gundar-Goshen country and wants to develop on this land and build a hotel. And my first thought was it was going to be around the case about land rights and everything like that. What I loved about this book is just how the book just explores the family, just explores the community and the different types of people in the community, the uncles, the parents, the children, and just the way these Aboriginal people interact with each other and try and live through their life. And it was quite amusing, it was quite funny. I don't know if I'm doing the best to describe this book, but it's definitely an interesting book. I could definitely see why it won the Miles Franklin. There are moments where I got really annoyed with the language of the book. And I grew up in a very small country town, and it's the way people talked all the time, not just the Aboriginals, but most of the country town were talking that way. And I think I just got irritated by the reminder of growing up. And I am looking forward to reading more from this author. I think she's a great author. That was just a little gripe. That's just a little problem I had. And it's not really something that I can really criticize. It's just a personal issue that I had with it. Next, I read The Dry Heart by Natalia Ginzburg, and this was translated by Francis Frenaye. And this is a Italian book, kind of a modern, forgotten classic. And this might have been the highlight, or at least one of the highlights of the month. There are two other books I want to talk about that I really enjoyed as well. The basic idea behind the book is it starts off with this woman, and one of the first lines in the book is, I shot him right between the eyes. And then it goes back and explores their relationship, explores the events that led up to her shooting her husband. And it's a look at like a domestic nightmare. It kind of read like a thriller. It was pretty full on. I was able to fly through it just by the way it was written, but you had a deeper look at her loneliness, her desire to be loved, and the gender imbalance in their relationship, and his infidelities and his inability to commit to the relationship even though he married her. The whole lot just plays out. There's just so many layers of different domestic issues playing out throughout this book, and I really appreciated it. I think it made for a great read, and if you're interested in this kind of book, I feel like it kind of something worth experiencing because it's hard to really talk about. I just recommend it, and I hope people will give it a try. And it's like 90 pages, so easy to get through. Next, I read Adèle by Leïla Simile, and this was translated by Sam Taylor. This is a novel about a woman with a sex addiction, and we just follow her marriage and her struggle to remain faithful, struggle to commit to the marriage when this feeling inside her all the time is bubbling over, which leads her to have sex with strangers, have sex with anyone, just to feel desired, just to feel wanted and needed, and then the guilt that follows that, and the cycle that continues over and over again. This author wrote Lullaby, or in America it's called The Perfect Nanny, which I enjoyed more, and it was the reason I picked up this book. I wanted to see what she did with the concept of sex addiction in marriage. But I don't know if this book worked too well. I feel like there was something missing. There was an element here that was missing that could have really made this far more interesting. And I think the problem I had was that she gave in to her urges too frequently, and she never felt like she could escape her addiction, never really tried to escape her addiction, and tried to explore that struggle of trying to be a loving wife and a mother would have been more interesting if she was actually trying. And I think that why this book didn't resonate with me as much as I was hoping. Next, I read The Slynx by Tatyana Tolstaya, and this was translated by Jamey Gambrell. And I love this book. I read her short stories previously and really liked her dark wit and humor. And I wanted to see how that translated into a novel, so I had to pick this book up. Basically, it's a post apocalyptic novel set in what used to be Moscow in a post nuclear world. And we are looking at, like, basically how the kind of like a exploration into how Moscow is post Soviet Union, like all the power's gone, everything is a mess, the economics, everything is just in shambles, and trying to rebuild the country. That's kind of the allegory that I feel like she's trying to explore in this book. But I really appreciated it for her humor and her wit, and there is a lot of laugh out loud moments. It's kind of post modern in a style, but I feel like saying that I'm just including too many posts in this. So we've got postmodern, post apocalyptic, post nuclear, post Soviet novels. So we're just going overboard with the post. But definitely I'd recommend this book, and I'd probably like to do a review on this. I need to work out my feelings a bit better than this ramble, but I highly recommend this if you're interested in contemporary Russian literature. Last book I read was The Polyglot Lovers by Lina Wolff, and this is translated by Saskia Vogel. And like the premise behind this book is this 26-year-old woman is alone, unhappy, decides to join a dating app, and she finds this man, and they start developing this relationship, and she eventually goes to meet him. Things go a little messy, a little insane, but he shows her a manuscript of a book written by a man who decided to write a book about women, and it was a one of a kind manuscript. The relationship between these two is kind of messed up, and out of anger, she burns the manuscript, and yet still remains in this relationship. And like trying to explain the premise is really difficult because the whole purpose of the book is just to make fun of the way men write women in literature and how two dimensional and just like a tongue in cheek kind of satire that's just looking at the nuances of feminism, especially in literature and the way women are portrayed. And I really enjoyed this book because the characters, like especially the women characters, start off with this really weird one-dimensional male author archetype, and they start getting real depth. Like she's just settles for this guy that is overweight and balding, and he's the only one that seems to be concerned about his weight. He's the only one that ever mentions that he's unattractive and overweight. But she stays with him, and it feels like she shouldn't be in this relationship. You see that relationship develop. You see her personality develop after that, and then you meet the ex-wife, who's this gorgeous, curvy woman who's blind, and it kind of poking fun of this whole idea that this really attractive woman would be married to this guy, because obviously the only reason she would be married to him is because she's blind. And then it plays out, and these characters, these women, are really strong-willed, real complex and interesting characters, and like she's taken these tropes and she's turned them into these really interesting people to read about and to follow. And I think that's what I enjoyed about this book. I really liked how she makes such fun of how male authors write, and then shows how complex women can be, even if you basing them off a archetype that is ridiculous. So I guess that's the reason I enjoyed this book, and another one I'd recommend. So they're the books I've read in September. I am currently reading Ducks Newburyport and absolutely loving it. It's 1,000 pages. Many people have talked about this probably. I'm about 25% through, and yes, the biggest shock is that I'm reading a non-translation. The more I read about Lucy Ellmann and the more I read about this book, the more I wanted to read it. This whole idea of angry ranting and 900-page single sentence, all those kind of things, made me want to read it. So this is my primary focus for the month. There are a couple of other books I'm still currently reading. One of them is my book club book, which I'll need to complete very soon, but I'm actually hating it. It's called The Thousand Doors of January. And it started off well. Stylistically, it started off really well. Kind of like a modern version of The Secret Garden, but set in the same sort of era. But then it got a little too fantastical for me. It got a little too, like, I hate fantasy and I don't enjoy reading it. And when they started introducing vampires and things like that, I started losing interest. And the further I read through it, the further I lose interest. So, not a book for me, but I'm sure it's going to get a lot of attention because of the style, because of the writing. But just read The Secret Garden instead. That's an amazing book, and I would recommend it. I'm also reading a crime book called Claire DeWitt and the Bohemian Highways, just a little palate cleanser in between some of the harder, more literary stuff that I'm reading. And I just like to have a crime novel every now and then just to relax and escape. And I do love crime novels, and I do love exploring books like this, but I'm very particular in my selection. But for now, it's okay. I'm enjoying it, and I'll finish it. Nothing special. Too focused on this book and absolutely adoring it. So that's it for me. If you want to find me elsewhere, all my links to social media are in the description below. And as always, thank you for watching.